Well, hey, welcome to the Parenting Bible Study. I'm Pastor Pete.
I'm Pastor Andy.
We're going to be going through Paul Tripp's book, Parenting, and today we're working on Chapter 1. So, not sure if you've gotten the handout from what we'll be using, but we're just working on 3 questions. The first one is, what is your biggest take-home from this chapter? So, Andy, start us out.
Well, as I read this chapter, there's a lot of wonderful truths in here. They're very helpful. But something that really stood out to me was the calling to which the author calls us to in parenting is not just to raise good children or responsible children, well-mannered children, even children who will be able to take care of themselves someday. But this was making clear that the call to parenting is a holy calling. And we should have a concern not only for our kids to be those things I mentioned, but to not just be good children, but to be godly children, to have a commitment to Christ and to a personal relationship with Him. And so that really helped clarify some things for me in terms of what I do in relationship to my kids day to day.
Yeah, my big idea is kind of similar. I wrote here that God has chosen, called, and equipped you for this job. I got to admit that on a regular basis, I feel completely unprepared, completely kind of flabbergasted at times, like, what are we doing wrong here? What's going on? Why is this so hard? So the reassurance that God has called you to this. He intends this for you as a parent. It wasn't a mistake. This was something He wants for you, and He's giving you, if we believe the Scripture, everything we need to do what He's called us to do. So that was kind of my big take home.
Yeah, that's so important to remember too, especially when you feel that you've failed as a parent, because we all do. We feel that, and we have to remember that it's not by accident that we have children, and it's not by accident that our children have us as parents. We have a calling to pursue, and we can't do that apart from the power of God and really connecting that to the message of the gospel every day.
Well, that's really good. So the second question we want to answer, just as a way to go through the chapter, is, what did you underline? And so I encourage you to, if you didn't underline something in chapter 1, when you do chapter 2, get your underliner out. But we're just going to go through some of the things that we underlined in the book that we thought was really important. So Andy, why don't you pick a quote that you underlined? It's hard to pick because there's so many. But what did you underline?
Yeah, well, one of the things I actually underlined was on page 28, where it says that we are seeking to get things out of ministry that we were never meant to get. And because we make bad choices that are harmful to our families. If you get your identity, meaning, and purpose, reason for getting up in the morning and inner peace from your ministry, you're asking your ministry to be your own personal Messiah, because you are, it will be very hard for you to say no. And because it's hard for you to say no, you will tend to neglect important time relationship commitments you should be making to your children. And whether or not it's your ministry, it could be work, it could be just some other priority that you have in life. If you're trying to get your fulfillment and sense of meaning and identity from anything other than your relationship to Christ, then you're going to end up neglecting some of the things that Christ has called you to do, like being a parent.
Yeah, so boy, just practically speaking, the other day, I needed to be here to work. I work at a church. Obviously, you know that I'm a pastor. But that time constraint was kind of crunching down on me. And at the same time, my kids were sitting at the table around breakfast, really opening up about some of the things that were going on in their life. And so I was really tempted to go, man, I got to get out of here. I got stuff to do. I got a ministry to take care of. And here, my ministry and calling were right there in front of me. So I think that's really good. That whole section where he talks about different heart idols.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, for you and I, when he starts talking about ministry being an idol, we perk up because that's
Sure.
that's what we do. But there was many other idols that he brought up that I thought were very, career success and
yeah.
possessions, things that you want. So I think, all of those idols were very powerful. I'm trying to choose between the quotes here, but there's a good one on the bottom of page 30 going into page 31.
Okay.
If you don't acknowledge God, not only are you a profoundly disadvantaged human being, but you will insert yourself in the middle of your world and make it all about you. I thought that with parenting so often. When my kids embarrass me by their poor behavior in public.
That happens from time to time, doesn't it?
Yeah, more often than I want to admit. And so I'm angry at them, but the reason I'm angry at them is because I think it's reflecting on me.
Yeah.
And I'm not even thinking about how does this reflect on the Lord, and is this an opportunity that God sent me to, to parent my kids and help them through a difficult situation. So that whole idea of what's most important to you, for all of us, the default is we are most important to us. And if we can't get ourselves off the idol of our heart, then I think we're going to be really steering the wrong direction with our parenting.
Yeah, and having those misplaced priorities in parenting can lead us to depend on our kids in a way that's really out of balance with what we're called to do.
Right.
We should not be looking at our kids to fulfill, our sense of purpose or identity, and if that puts so much pressure on them. And I think actually the author gets into that as the book goes forward, but we're called to build into their lives, to point them to Christ. We certainly can expect to have that kind of input from them from time to time, but if we're looking to them for our identity and a sense of purpose through how they may behave and how they impress other people around us, or whatever kind of scenario we find ourselves in, that can be very dangerous, and it can also be very just put a lot of pressure on our kids that is really out of place.
Yeah, they weren't intended to have.
Yeah.
Maybe to kind of wrap up this section, top of 32, he says, God hasn't made a mistake in tasking you with being his tool for the forming of the souls of your children. So, there's times it feels like a mistake, doesn't it? And we want to say, no, God hasn't made a mistake. He's called us to this. Second paragraph, same page, he says, every day is filled with opportunities to point to God. I guess that might transition us to the final question that we want to ask when we're reading, which is, what are you going to do differently this week as a result of what we read? And something I tried to do the week I read this is just try to take some little opportunities to point to God. He talks about doing so like in creation and other things. And so I was with one of my daughters who really likes science and that sort of thing. And so we were talking about the fields we were driving by. We have lots of fields here in Delaware. And isn't it cool how God designed it so you can grow these plants and then we can use them to make food? And she was like, yeah, that is great. And then she started talking about other things that God had done. And it was like, wow, that was easy. I thought, I thought she would resist when I made something spiritual, and she didn't. She kept talking and adding things to what I had said. So my take home is to try to do that more often.
Yeah. One of the points he makes in this chapter is the role of the church, the local church has in parenting, but also that does not have in parenting. And I got thinking about that, even though I'm a pastor in the church, sometimes I get thinking that, well, as long as my kids are present in this church, then,
everything will turn out okay.
To be okay. And I guess it made me think, okay, I got to start thinking maybe a little bit differently sometimes, in very subtle ways, that my responsibility, my calling is to parent my kids. But at the same time, I'm in a community where there are other parents who have the same calling. And so we are to assist one another. And so that made me think more carefully about how vulnerable I am about my imperfections as a parent, and chances are other parents have those same imperfections.
Right.
And so just being more aware of the community of faith that I'm in and the role that it should have and it shouldn't have in the life of my own family. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, that wraps up what we want to say about chapter 1. We want to encourage you now to add to what we've said with whoever you're meeting with, and to encourage yourself in the lessons that you learn from this chapter. We'll see you next time.
God bless you.